Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today, we're going to do another installment of the weekly metagame breakdown where we look at the highest win rate, best decks in standard best of 3. If you're a best of 1 gamer, we put out the video yesterday. If you're looking at other formats on the Arena ladder, we cover every format, ideally once a week, best of 1 and best of 3 to give you a kind of view of what's happening in each format. We get the data from Untapped.gg, what you see on the screen, companion tool that runs alongside Arena's client, aggregates user win rates, gives a whole bunch of cool stats. If you want to track your own games or look at some of the details, you can check out Untapped linked in the video description. I'll paste all these deck lists and timestamp them so you can jump around the video. We'll also be looking a little at MTG Decks, which kind of curates some of the MTGO League data as well. So we're going to start with popularity of the day, and then we are going to go into each of the little deck lists. So the popularity is kind of just a metagame distribution. I will make a note that for whatever reason, Untapped is not classifying the Boros Tokens deck, the Caretaker's Talent. I'm going to raise a ticket with the team later today to get that added in ideally. So I have it covered at the end, but it's not factoring into the results we're seeing right now. So just kind of get that out of the way. But yeah, let's jump into it, folks. Popularity of the day, Gruul Aggro is the highest volume game played, Diamond and Mythic rank at about 12%, a little over 11. Rakdos Lizards just a shade under 10. We've seen an uptick in Dimir Midrange, kind of a return to that pre-rotation shell that is at about 7.3. Boros Mice at about 7. Jeskai Convoke, we see that coming up a little bit in terms of volume. Todd Anderson won the MTGO Creator Challenge. It was a 5K over the weekend with Jeskai Convoke, so likely you'll see a spike in terms of that. There's Golgari Mid at about 4. We see Azorius Control at about 3. And then the domain, 4 Color Angels is the domain list coming in at about 3. Another deck we'll cover that's not going to be huge volumes, but seeing a bit more play in terms of MTGO leagues is the Golgari Lands combo. So we'll take a look at that later in the video. So let's jump into it, folks. We have Standard, Diamond to Mythic. We are going from September. So if we look September 2nd to now, it's 9,200 games. If we look for July 30th to now, it's 120. Kind of take a look at the both of those just to kind of see, get a nice population of games. And then we'll jump into it. So the Jeskai Convoke list that we mentioned is coming in at about 83%. These are smaller sample sizes, so we're really covering the viability of decks. The win rates are going to vary slightly from person to person, but this kind of gives you an idea. So the blue versions, you can still play Boros, but blue gives you access to Spyglass Siren, which provides an ability to have another 1-drop that creates an artifact and a body, so that allows more consistent turn 1. We had Voldaire and Epicure in the past, which we don't have that second copy, so the Spyglass Siren fixes that mold. You have the War Leader's Call, some Sanguine Evangelists, Immodanes as your 3-drops, and then just the kind of core of the decks. You shatter a artifact you control, you get a bunch of 1/1s, kind of go wide, Anthem, Ping, and overrun your opponent. Sideboard, Tectonic Hazard for the mirrors. You have Torch Tower, cheap removal, negate and protect the negotiators as cheap counter spells. These allow you to deal with things like temporary lockdown, Sunfall, stuff of that nature. Lorn, another way to deal with a resolved Sunfall, and then Urbrass Forge for the heavier removal-based matchups. From there, we go to Golgari Midrange. So this is a version that some folks, I know Doomwake was playing, Jaffer, MTG was another Twitch streamer. So we're seeing kind of a crime package. So with Freestyle Lookout, you have the Iridescent Vine Slashers. So not necessarily the combo variant with Vraska that you sink, like 1,000 mana into the class, then it gets blown up, but a lot of cheap removal, cut downs, go for the throats, shoot the sheriff, all mixed into there. The Terra Sunder, really flexible card with all the talents going around, Duress for hand hate, Mosswood Dread Knight for card advantage, a Skitter and Liliana. Skitter's in here because it triggers the Freestyle Strider Lookout, another way to get treasures. A Hostile Investigator for hand hate, Shieldred, Urgent Necropsy, as just a really flexible card. You can hit a whole range of things. Urbrass Forge, you can hit talents, creatures, whatever it may be. Powerful top end in here, just Aquazots, Gix, Cruelty. So a couple one-ofs, but flexibility in terms of a lot of these effects. Just a lot of 2-for-1 value in a lot of these cases. Virtue, removal, and then reanimate. Nissa is really strong against kind of the bigger mana decks of the format. Demolition Field's another way to trigger the Freestyle Strider lookout on your opponent's turn, so you got a lot of usefulness out of your lands as well. More removal, more hand hates, Choking Miasma for Convoke, the low to the ground decks, Lily for the more grindy matchups along with Hostile Investigator, Tranquil Throwback, just a flexible card, Artifact Enchantment hate, Graveyard hate, and Life Gain, and then the end as just a catch-all removal and kind of surgical extraction style effect. From there, we go to Simic Cookies, so 73.8%. This deck is an artifact aggro deck. You have Thieving Wormlet that gets bigger whenever artifacts come into play. Mockingbird in this deck's really nice, has a lot of cheap targets to get like useful abilities. A Flying Teething Wormlet is nothing to scoff at. Tough Cookie can animate your cheaper or your non-creature artifacts, produces multiple artifacts in itself. Surge Engine can be unblockable, and you have all these activated abilities of your creatures, things like Gingerbread unblockable, so you can kind of assemble your Ultron creature with Agatha's Soul Cauldron, get them bigger, kind of get value. Hunter's Talent as removal, and a way to give trample to your big things. Schooner can be some card advantage, plays around non-lockdown sweepers. Larcenist as removal. Sentinel is another reoccurring way to make artifacts, a little bit bigger of a creature. Offense, defense. Zoetic Glyph can animate any of your various artifacts. Fountain Port's another useful card in the mana base, just allow you to draw off all the miscellaneous tokens, and gives you kind of like a mana sink in the heavier removal matchups. Murex does make artifact tokens, so it's a way to trigger a lot of these effects. Hard-hitting questions is cheap removal. Artifact Enchantment hate. This is kind of removal in this deck, just being tempo-oriented. 1 mana to bounce stuff like that. Pick your poison, just flexible, force them to sack an Atraxa, lockdown, a talent, whatever it may be. Repulsive Mutation can be a counter spell or just a pump, and then more removal, and then activated abilities with Tashana. From there, we go to Gruul Aggro. So there was a version that was a little bit dated that had a slightly higher win rate, but this is kind of the direction some of the decks are going now. So there's the ones with the talent in there, in Keepers, just a way to kind of recurring target your Valiant creatures every turn. And then there's kind of the Twinferno two-headed giant kind of all-in combo variant. I like Snakeskin Veil in these decks better than Royal Treatment because you can only have 1 roll on your creature. So if you target it with something with monstrous roll, you can't then have the, I think it's the Young Hero roll, whatever gives the ward 1. But this deck's just about prowess. Just kill him as quick as possible. Heartfire Hero targets, gets bigger. The Emberheart Challenger gets targets, gets bigger. The versions that are on the Innkeeper's Talent drop some of the double effects. They play Manifold Mouse to give double strike. So that's kind of another variant that you might run into on the ladder. And then we're getting the new land in the new set, which is going to be a huge improvement to this deck because the mana base is terrible otherwise. You either have to play Restless Ridgeline or Thran Portal, both of which are just terrible. Pick your poisons, just flexible removal, hazard for the go wide decks, Blooming Blast for kind of the mirrors, low to the ground, Haste, just card advantage, Urbrass Forge for heavy removal, and Witchstalker Frenzy in here as well. You might see links in some of these. Some of them are playing Koth, which I don't agree with. Just you're a pretty low mana deck and you have a bunch of duels, so it's inconsistent with the volume its Binus ability for removal actually plays in. From there, we go to Rakdos Lizards, 67%. So creature aggro deck. This one's got a little bit more recursive elements. Forsaken Miner in here, Hired Claw, Iridescent. So the core of the deck, you want to ping your opponent for value. The value lets you have like Thought Stalker to Thoughtseize them. Flame Cash Gecko becomes Burning Tree Emissary. Flame Blast Mentor draws you some cards. You have card advantage with Laughing Flint as well. Hand hate with Deep Cavern Bat. You'll sometimes see upwards of 4 bats in these lists. This one's got some Bitter Triumphs, just a little bit more removal, no cut downs in this one. Sideboard, you do have the cut downs. Hand hate, some more removal that can also hit artifacts. Anoint, just another way to kind of exile, really good against the Heartfire Hero since they don't get the death trigger. Deluge for go wide, and then Urbrass Forge for the more heavy removal matchups, lockdown style effects. Excuse me. Go to Gruul Ramp next, 66%. So this is a deck that's looking to do Smuggler Surprise, cheating into play stuff. So ideally you cheat into play like Terror of the Peaks and Calamity, copy the Terror, and then you make a copy of it with the Calamity, and then just deal huge amounts of damage to your opponent. You have Ramp in Iron Crag as well as Clifftop Lookout. The Trailblazer can also help you ramp ahead. Your top end's just like Timmy bangers. We got Vaultborn Hydra, Carnosaur, Spinewood Armadillo can help you find lines earlier as a big threat. Roxanne can be removal, ramp all in one. This draws you cards as well as the Vaultborn Tyrant, Brotherhood's End as an early sweeper, and then Torch the Tower. Sideboard, just more removal options, Stonebrain for if you want to get hit like an Atraxa. There's not too many dedicated combo decks in the format. You're probably better off just more interaction, to be honest. Like I would play maybe Pick Your Poison in this slot could be another reasonable option. Itali's just for the mid-range mirrors. Portal just kind of goes over the top of decks. Heavy discard decks, you have Obstinate Baloth in there. You then go to Domain. So the core of these decks are often at this point green, white, and then they'll splash. So this one here, you have the Ancient Cornucopia engine to gain you life, lockdowns, your sweeper package with Sunfall, Archangel, and Atraxa can be cast uncounterable with Cavern of Souls. Beanstalk's in here, just draws you a bunch of cards. You have the Terra Sunders for flexible removal. This one's also on some virtues to give you some more early life gain, and then redundancy in the late game with the enchantment half. Sideboard, you have a counterspell, just various removal options. Whirlbacks, Baloths, and this is really good in the mirror. You'll sometimes see Jaces in here. You could see more counterspells. You can see Tishana's Tidebinder. Really how you want to set it up in terms of attacking the meta and what you're trying to beat. Go to a surprise one. Call your parents, call your friends. Mono green. Almost played 100 games. 65% win rate, which is pretty sweet. This deck really doesn't want to see Sunfall, but what you have, Evolving Adaptive gets bigger as you cast more big things. You have Goldvein Hydra as a way to haste out damage, and then it leaves behind a number of treasure tokens that helps you cast your future stuff. Paw Patch can redistribute counters. And it's another reasonable 1-drop on its own, just creature 2/1 for 1 with Trample. Snakeskin to protect your stuff. You have Hunter's Talent as more removal. Innkeeper's Talent, as we put counters. Keen-Eye Curator can eat at the graveyards, get bigger over time, and then could eventually get Trample. Querying Beastcaller, another card that gets bigger as you cast more things. And then you have Sharpshooter, Artifact Enchantment Hate, Sentinel of the Nameless City. As we mentioned, its effect, Axebane, Ferox, just harder to kill creature. Death Touch Haste kind of trades up. Fountain Port, Oak Village, in the mana base. This one might be a little ambitious. And then the sideboard, just against bigger creatures, you have Ankle Biter just as cheap Death Toucher, various removal effects, Pelucranos for flyers, just bigger creature, Ren for the Grandier matchups, Thrun against heavy removal, Nissa, you have Cavern of Souls for heavy counterspell matchups, which usually aren't too frequent. The Hidden Nursery, these are a little interesting. They just kind of add more lands, I guess, when you're kind of shifting up. The Nissa isn't that. It's only 22 lands in the main, so interesting kind of sideboard configuration there. We then go to Azorius Control. So this is kind of a Caretaker's Talent control deck. So talents, your draw engine. You have Burrows, you have Sunfalls, the Archangel, Beza package. But early removal, also Smite, card advantage, and Get Loss, or Deduce, counters, 3 steps ahead. You have Get Loss, you have the Fountain Port engine. So just kind of kill everything, control the board, win with redundancy over time with the Caretaker's Talent. More counters, Graveyard Hate, Annex Sentry for cheap removal that can then block, Chromehost Sea Shark for the heavy control, or like most of the time people board out removal, so you can then bring it in and kind of run them down. Lauren for like Forges, Caretaker's Talent, stuff like that. Some lockdowns as removal, Tishana's is another flash threat that can stop activated abilities. Then go to 5-color Niv, 61%. So another kind of ramp deck, similar concept. We have the Ancient Cornucopias. This one's full rainbow. Ill-Time Explosion as sweepers. You have Lightning Helix. Doppelgang can kind of go big and copy a bunch of things. The deck's framed around Niv Mizzet Supreme that lets you cast your instants and sorceries that are 2 or more colors from the graveyard. Have Jumpstart, so you can recast them from the graveyard. This version has Leyline bindings, really cheap through all the domain effects. Make Your Own Luck can recast stuff, some Sunfalls, Traxa on the top end, Ral kind of value town, your full Beanstalk package. So just a different take of the domain list. Graveyard Hate, some counters, sweepers for the aggressive decks. Soul Search is kind of a hand hate effect, some lockdowns, card advantage with Hugs, Jace for the mirror, discard decks or aggressive decks, and then Kogla and Yadaro can be discarded to destroy artifacts, enchantments, and then shuffle it into your library. So Dimir Midrange, this is a list that's been putting up some results online. Kind of tempo flash version, you have like Masterminds in here, Plum Creed Escort can protect one of your things, bunch of cheap removal, you have counters and Phantom Interference, 3 steps ahead, you have the cheap Flyers plus Gix package for card advantage, the Shanas for activated abilities, Urtai can target activated abilities, can be a counter spell, Shieldred kind of on the top end as well. Again, sideboard's just going to be hand tape for the mid-range mirrors. Big decks, you have counter spells. You have sweepers kind of mixed in for the aggressive decks. Aquazots for the grindy matchups. Nice lifelink body. Then we have, this is just an example. So this one is from Flesh Eating Gnome. They got into Mythic 10 and 3, but this is a list that has been going around. This is the kind of new analyst lands combo. So we don't have the Kamigawa lands, but it's another way to kind of combo out. So you plot the Pitless Carnage. You sack a whole bunch of lands, you get them all back. Like you float the mana, you can get them all back with Aftermath Analyst or Lumra, and then you kind of just keep drawing a bunch of cards. With Spelunking, they come into play untapped. With Nissa, they gain mana. One thing to note, if you are going to do the sack a bunch of lands to Lumra, leave 1 land behind, because when it enters play, if there's no lands in play, it doesn't see them before the trigger goes on the stack, so it would die. But what you do is basically set it up so you bring a bunch of lands back with a Vine Lasher out, and then you just ping your opponent to death. Find your combo, some early removal effects mixed in. You have some sack effects with like Fabled Passage, Evolving Wilds, and Escape Tunnel as well. More cheap removal. If they attack your graveyard, you have Glissa. Against aggressive decks, you have Titania, Sweepers, and Terror Tides, Rollback, as we mentioned. And lastly, just including a Boros Forge deck, the Boros Tokens deck. This one got 5-0 on MTGO earlier this week. Very stock list at this point. We've seen it. The Urbrass Forge, Caretaker's Talon is the engine, bunch of cheap removal, sweepers, kill everything. We have Archangel Elspeth and the Eternal Wanderer on the top end. Utility lands and like Fountain Port mixed in. Sideboard, you're seeing some Abrades for the mirror kind of effects. Destroy Evil's got some flexibility. Season of the Burrows, a nice flexible card, hits a bunch of things, makes tokens. Bonehorde Dracosaur for like the mid-range matchups. They will sometimes take out some of the removal because you don't have necessarily a single target creature. So this could come in and kind of overone if your opponent doesn't have like the go for the throats. Phases for the aggressive decks. Virtue of Loyalty, again, nice little kind of mid-range threat there that kind of snowballs, lets you go offense, defense. That's it for the week. Hope you have a great one. Let me know what you've been playing, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.